All right, so let's start with what we're going to be doing throughout the game, right? First thing I'd like to say is we got to support our partner. We won't agree with everything that's being called, and you won't agree with everything I call, I'm sure, but we got to support each other on the field. We don't need to be making gestures or any body language that would suggest otherwise, so keep that in mind. We start the game, obviously, with play ball, as we tell them to do.
Got to have 9 to start the game. You can finish with 8.
Finish with 8. There you go. Yeah, I do.
You can't start with, you got to have 9 to start.
So anyway, we start the game. You have, during those days of, like we've been having with rain, you have to be aware of weather conditions. I think the rule is if we hear thunder, we have to remove them from the field for 30 minutes. And then if we hear it again, it's an additional 30 minutes and so forth. At some point in time, I imagine the game will be suspended depending on how far you are into the game. But there's typically nowadays someone with this weather monitor, usually a school administrator there, and they're kind of monitoring that. And whatever they say is what we got to do. Don't put yourself in jeopardy or the players in jeopardy. It's not a good thing. All right, so let's see here. Okay, if a game is suspended, what I was going to say, you need to make sure you let Jimmy know so he can advise the teams in Chapel Hill as to determine what they're going to do with the game if it was suspended. And also, if you have your lineup card, you need to keep that, because if it's resumed from that point, we need to know where it was as we started. So it's very important to keep that. All right, you need to manage the game by moving it along. Don't take or waste time socializing with players and coaches and spectators. Remember that players want to play. That's what they're there for. So if we delay in between innings by chatting with someone, we're just delaying the game and they're ready to go. Remember that pitchers get 1 minute or 5 pitches between innings. If there's a weather situation, because it's very cold or damp or whatever, for whatever reason, you may allow them to have more. It can't obviously go on forever, but weather does dictate sometimes how many pitches we will allow them to have. Normally, if I'm a field umpire, I'll help you count the pitches, especially if you're taking substitutions and having to do all that. I usually count the pitches, and then once I see you finished, if they've met those 5 or whatever we're going to allow, I say let's go and play ball, or just balls in. As a plate umpire, we should always verify the score between innings with each scorekeeper, making sure that they agree. If by chance they don't, then we need to get them together and find out where the issue is. But that's very important. Don't let that linger. So during the between innings, the plate umpire is to be positioned on the side of the foul line of the team coming to bat. And I know the book says that on the field umpires to be positioned in the outfield over in right field area. I don't do that, and I'll tell you why. I usually go stand between first and home and try to help out with counting the pitches, or if you as the plate umpire are taking substitutes, try to get everybody ready for that. And also it gives me a time that I may need to discuss something with the plate umpire or them with me. And it's kind of hard to do that if I'm out in right field. So I usually just stand there. And coaches may have a question that you can help with. So, but that's your choice. Just stay out of the way of throwing balls. But the book does say to stay in right field. But I found it advantageous to be between first and home. All right. As I said a moment ago, we need to move the game along. We want to play. if at the end of the game, we don't need to just rush off if we think that it could be some activity that would possibly change the outcome of the game. Remember the fourth out appeal and things of that nature. But if the game is over and everything's as it should be, get on off the field and don't linger, because you just open yourself up to conversation that you might not want to hear. And we should lead together as officials. And we avoid those players and coaches and spectators. We all know people at every game. And there's nothing wrong with just speaking and saying hello, but if you're going to stand there and talk to them, that looks bad by the visiting team possibly. So we need to try to stay away from that. Need to try to ignore any comments that we can. We shouldn't have rabbit ears unless it's something that's going to be threatening to us or the players. And if you're hearing things that might reach that level, then you would certainly want to let Jimmy know in your game report, because he needs to know and prepare officials for the next time that someone goes there. As I've said before in the earlier meeting, be mindful of your comments and verbiage after a game, before a game, even in the parking lot. As I said, social media is out there watching now, and you need to be careful what you're saying and doing. And, you know, we should not be using profanity at any time. I think that's just a no-no. Never talk to reporters or the press. Refer them to home management, or they can call Jimmy and let him to have that responsibility. After the game, we should be talking in the parking lot probably if we have time. And I said in the other meeting that we would want to arrive 30 to 45 minutes in advance, and realizing that sometimes we just can't due to travel restrictions, or you get off work late, or there's a bottleneck somewhere or a wreck. But, you know, we should try to be there on time. And again, I will say, remind you, or call your partner if that's going to be an issue. But at the end of the game, it's a perfect time to discuss something that happened during the game that we would be concerned about, and so that we don't address it some other time in the game, but just talk about it and help each other. It's all about learning. Even though we had the game and it's over with, it may help us to do something different or better in the next game. So it's a good time to talk about that. As the play umpire, you're to provide the game result to Jimmy at the end of the game. I don't think he particularly cares about the score other than who won, but that information is needed. The game administrator should be on that as well. Any notes of concern about coaches or players or what you might have seen should be in that report. And again, it's all about putting that in there so future officials in the games will know how to handle something if it's going to be a problem. So those are really the things in the game. I can't tell you how to call the game. I will say we need to be consistent in what we do, be it consistently bad or consistently good. And I think more than times than not, we're consistently good. But you can't change a game or the way you call a game during the game. Sometimes it creates problems. If you're going to call it tight, you can let up. If you're going to call it loose, you can't call it tight late. So the game does dictate how we officiate the game, because a route makes it difficult sometimes. And I've said before in other clinics that you got one pitcher that can shoot it through a tube, and you got another pitcher that can throw it in the ocean. Makes it tough on you, because you're trying to balance it as best you can. But strikes will get you home early, you know, and so that's what we try to work with. But those are some things that we just should be aware of. A few things that I just made note of, as I'd say would be a point of emphasis or a buzzword or a statement. Be professional. You know, we should always do that. We're representing our association, which we feel strongly about, in the high school association, and we should always be professional. And as I said in the other meeting, we should go to the game with a good attitude. Everybody has a bad day sometimes, but we can't take that to the field with us. It's about the kids and the game, and we want to have a good positive attitude about that. As I just mentioned, be consistent with your calls as best you can. It makes it easier for the players to know how to play the game. Manage the game. Even though we know the rules, it's important to do that and know the rules, but we need to learn how to manage a game. And as I was saying in the other meeting, you need to understand the intent of a rule so you know how to manage it, because sometimes you have to be a little bit flexible. Don't let coaches intimidate you. If you're a new official, sometimes they'll do that. If you're with one of us older folks, sometimes they want to jump on your official, and we're not going to allow that. It's games for the kids, and we don't want coaches creating situations where we have to monitor them more than we monitor the game. So be careful how you do that. We should hustle, as I've said before. Try to always be in position, and many times you won't, because the player will move you to where you want to be, or a ball will create a situation where you can't get there, but try to get there if you can, and hustle to get to that point. As I said in the other meeting, if you hustled and you're on top of the play, even if you miss it and you sell the call, it's easier to get along with coaches in doing that. So try to get to those. Preventive officiating. We talk about this from time to time. If you see something about to happen, if you see a coach about to do something that's going to create a problem, it doesn't hurt to tell them. Say, Coach, you know, that's just going to be a problem if you do this, or you can't do that, and so forth. So use preventive officiating to make the game smoother and easier for you to officiate. We all want smooth games, right? I always would like to have it that way, but they're not always smooth. And sometimes we have to kind of monitor what's going on. But make sure you take your subs and keep your lineup card and keep all that information on it. As far as courtesy runners, keeping those logged in. And I don't know how a lot of people do it, but I usually flip the lineup card over, and I usually have like 7 innings that I monitor the score, and I always compare it with the scorekeeper to make sure we're in agreement. But you need to keep those subs marked on your card because of this re-entry rule that we play with, and especially with the BP flex changes. That's very important. And I think in one of the future clinics, some of the guys are going over to DP flex, and it's very important to listen to that, because there are ways that can be messy if it's not done properly. So make sure you do that. So if you have a situation with a coach that is getting a little heated, best thing you can do a lot of times is just listen to the coach. Sometimes they just want to vent. And if you just listen to them, and once it's over, say, well, I got it, coach. And careful what you say, because you can't take it back once you've said it. And sometimes it's better to listen twice as much as speak. So it's good to just listen to them. They just want to tell you what they got. And, I've often heard it being said before, by a coach, you can go argue with the official, but he's not going to change the call. So what's the point, right? You're not winning any favor anyway. So, all right, I know that's quick, and again, I've done these rather quick, but those are things during the game. If you get into scrimmages, work with someone that, if you're a new official or relatively new, try to work with an official that's been around for a while and listen and absorb some of that information, ask questions. It's very difficult doing Zoom meetings to try to cover everything that we need to cover. And especially if you're new, I feel like we're really shortchanging you, and I apologize for that, but it's the way it is now. But if you have questions about anything as you're going through the rule book, feel free to call myself or anybody. I'm certainly not an authority on the rules, but I think I can figure it out pretty well. And know most of them, but we should stay in contact with one another in that respect. But again, if you're new, it's very important to get the information now. You don't want to take the field and be uncomfortable. And if you are new, you're not going to know all the rules, even though that you study them. But it's good to be in contact with others that can help you. So, and typically a new official will be put with someone with some experience. So feel a little better about that. So it's really about all I have at this point. Steve, did you have any questions that we need to address? Oh, I can't hear you anyway.
I didn't know. I had muted myself to make sure I didn't sneeze or make some ugly comment.
Thank you.
It's and guys, I didn't have an ugly comment. Didn't have one to make. There's been no questions. Is one thing I'm gonna make sure I do mention quickly again is to make sure that you put your name in the chat so I know you hear it. And now there's a couple of comments coming up, so hang on a second.
Okay.
Donnie, how about going over the procedure for the coach to properly ask, challenge a judgment call play or to ask a question? That's something that's come up. So if you'll go over that.
That's a good question. That changed a couple of years or so back, whereas if a coach is concerned about a call or wants to discuss a call, he's supposed to come to the foul line and ask for you as the plate umpire to come over and talk to him. We don't allow them to go out onto the field to discuss it with the field umpire. We'll call the field umpire over if we want to have that conversation, but they're supposed to come politely, we'd hope, and ask us for to talk to them about what the call was. Keep in mind, those are judgment calls most of the time, so you're probably not going to overrule your partner. And if you feel like you need to, get the partner together by yourself first and talk with them and just see what they saw. If it is something that has to be overruled, then you guys need to discuss it. And I typically, if I feel like from the plate situation need to overrule the other official, I'll just let that official make the call, because you don't want to show each other up by no means. But just make sure that coach does not charge the field, is not ranting and raving and creating a situation bad for all of us.
And Donnie, as the person asked this question about emphasizing it, yeah, it is an emphasis. It's not, it is a continued emphasis every year right now that the coaches must go to that, in our case, the 35-foot line or 30-foot line, halfway to the between first and home or between home and third. That's where they go to ask for a play, and they don't come charging out there. That's a restriction to a dugout, or worse, if they come out there. In that case, they have to come out in a professional manner and request a review of that call and all of that. And that's and at the beginning of the season, it's a good reminder in that pregame conference with the coaches to remind them that's how they must question those calls. And they are not they have changed it so that the field umpire is allowed to come to that meeting. There's going to be times that he might not want to, and if he's real upset, that's a game day situation, whether you're going to go and enjoying that meeting.
Right.
And one question, Donnie, about confirming the scores between innings. Check the person had. You're going to check with both scorekeepers to make sure they both have the same score. Just right. So that, and for the new people, when you check the score between innings, then you're not coming back to those innings when they start questioning the score later on. You've already told me that the score was correct at the end of the third inning at 3-3. You're not coming back after that, after we've all agreed. and you probably know how many runs they scored that inning, and you keep up with it on your lineup card, as Donnie said.
Lester a lot scored, then it could get away from it. One thing I add too is, if you're a field umpire, make sure you have your indicator with you, and you're keeping up with balls and strikes with your partner and outs. I usually relay outs after every out just as a reminder. But it's good to keep that, because I'm telling you, sometimes you'll flip your indicator and not realize it, especially if there's a lot of activity at home plate sometimes. So it's always good to confirm that with each other.
All right, another question regarding refreshing our memory on guidelines for sportsmanship for coaches. The part of the guideline is we only talk to head coaches. And really, let's take that word, talk to them. You can talk to any coach, and I'll talk to any coach so long as they're asking me and talking to me in a professional, nice manner. When they start questioning calls out loud, no, coach, we're not doing that. As an assistant, you don't get that right. And he can't be hollering at us. So no question balls and strikes and that type thing. So sportsmanship is expected from the NCHSAA, and I know Jimmy expects it, and he mentioned it in the association meeting last week of how he expected it.
Yeah, and I don't think as an umpire, be it behind the plate or the field, we should be hollering at coaches because it just sounds bad. If you need to say something to the coach, just go over there and talk to them. It's best to do that. It just doesn't look good to be hollering back and forth, because you holler at them, they're going to holler at you, and before you know it, you're in a shouting match, and that's not where we should go.
All right, I got a couple more. I'm gonna hit this one first because it's dealing with the same content. Is there a situation when a coach would not be recognized, when you would not address his concern?
Balls and strikes, something that you've already addressed. You know, some coaches will linger on something that you've already talked about. Sometimes it's best just to ignore them and not hear them. I think you got to use your own judgment in that. How important is the request that they're making, or how ridiculous is it? Sometimes it's just best to just move on.
And I understand what Donnie's saying there, but for our new people, you don't let a coach continue on and on and on and not address it.
Right.
If he's constantly questioning something, you need to stop him. Doesn't mean you got to go deal with what his question is, but you got to stop him from continuing to question or continue to go back to a previous call.
Yeah, and just go to him and ask him, say, Coach, what's going on? What's the question? Okay, we've already talked about that. That's nothing we can do now. It's over with. Careful what you say in those situations, because especially if you're new, you may end up saying something that is not actually correct. So again, it's sometimes best just to listen, but don't let a coach just keep hammering you. That we're not going to allow that.
All right, here's a good question. Could you give an example of a pregame conversation that you might have with a newer official? All right, we're going out on the field, and
Sure.
I, as a veteran, are going out with somebody that's calling their first or second game. It may be a middle school game. But what kind of conversation would I want to have with that new official when we go out there?
Right. Good question. We hope that new official knows the position they're supposed to be in, but some things that we would ask them to look for are check swings, pull-offs at plate. So, you know, when you're in the C position over behind shortstop, that's a hard call to make as a field umpire, and sometimes there's a pull-off, and how you want to handle that with each other. If you need help, you know, you can discuss how you want to do it. Infield fly roll is another situation that we try to communicate to one another about. And everybody seems to have a little bit different signal, but whatever signal your team uses that day, or the two of you use, that's what you should be aware of. And it's just a good reminder to keep showing it to one another, and then show when it's not in effect too. But Those are things that we'd ask for, and I always usually tell it says, okay, so we got some minutes left. But I usually tell them to watch for illegal pitches, pulling off of the rubber and so forth, because as a field umpire, you'd be watching for that. If you need help, ask for help. If I need help, I'll ask you for help. Also on fly balls, I'll take fouls and flies. If I'm the plate umpire, those are not your responsibility, so don't call it. It looks bad for one to call one thing, one to call another, so just be aware of that. But those are typically things that you would tell a new official. If I'm working with you, obviously we might go a little bit deeper than that into some things that you might have concerns about, but the bigger thing is trying to be in the proper position and knowing what to call and what not to call. We can't help you with judgment. That's your judgment as to how you're going to call. But if you need help on it, feel free to ask. Now, some of the stuff that I wouldn't address with a coach is you're 5 feet away from a call at second base and I'm 65 feet away or 70, and you want to appeal to me for that call when it's bang bang call. What's the point, right? I'm not going to overrule that. It'd have to be just something that the world saw before that would ever happen. So, but those are a few things as you get into the season. Experienced official would go over those things with you, I'm sure, before the game. But you want to be on the same page.
Donnie, one thing I'm going to tell a new official is, if you got a banger call and it's your call, don't initially point at me to make a call for you.
Right.
Don't and in other words, you got to have confidence in your call, right or wrong. Make your call, and then number one, make it and see if you got a question. If coach doesn't question it, oh wow, sure, don't have to worry about it. If the coach does question it, hold tight for a second and see how much he questions it. And if he goes to if he comes to me or you, then we can address it. A judgment call is a judgment call. And if it's a banger, I might think you missed it, but I got a different angle and I may be wrong. So that's where Donnie's coming back, how far away he is. I might think you missed that call, but I ain't sure. All right, I see Glenn, you got the hand up on the thing. Do you have a question? You'll have to unmute yourself to ask the question.
One thing real quick there, Steve, I wanted to mention too is I would discuss with the new official how we're going to handle base coverage on tag ups and so forth. Who's going to cover what base and what we're going to look for, and that kind of varies a little bit with each individual. But who's going to be there? And if I say if I'm going to third as a plate umpire and I holler, I got third, then it's not your call, it's my call. I'll stay with it all the way. But those are things that you would talk about before the game. Did Glenn have a question?
Glenn's got his hand up.
He needs to unmute himself.
Yep, go ahead.
Should be on the bottom left down there, Glenn, of your computer, where it says mute, unmute. You may have to help him there, Steve.
All right, let me see if I can unmute him. All right. Hold on.
Steve.
Yeah.
Steve, this is Bernard. I think it's important, especially when we're working with new officials, that we teach them proper mechanics. We don't want to teach them our way, then they're going to be with somebody else. They're going to work to tell them something else. Teach them the right way to do it. And for all new officials, and then that'll keep them out of trouble, as long as they know those proper mechanics.
Absolutely. Yeah, we should really not be changing any, but we all have a little bit different style. I agree with you. And
well, I was talking about only when we have those new officials, they're trying to learn how to do it for the first time. Show them the right way.
Do it by the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
And here's a good point that will follow up with that. Before coming to this meeting, I was in a football clinic meeting, and one of our new potential officials officiated a lot out of another state, asked several questions, and some of them dealing with mechanics. And our whole thing is in North Carolina in football, and it needs to be here in softball too, is what do we do in this or that situation? Follow the mechanics. Follow the manual the NFHS has. Now, will that manual be different from the NCAA manual on circumstances? Yes. Which one are we to follow? NFHS manual. And that way we are together. And if it's going to be a difference that day between two veteran officials that work with each other enough, they may have a variance. But when you are working with people you haven't worked with or haven't worked with much, and that's going to happen in this, go by the NFHS manual. And if a new official, you will be getting rule books this year if you were not registered with North Carolina last year. But you need to let Jimmy know that, and he will get you those rule books, case book, and request a softball manual as well.
Yeah, the umpires manual, yeah.
The softball umpires manual.
Right.
I got too many sports on my head.
Good question, then. See anything else there, Steve?
Well, one other question that's a good point. If you're working with you, and this could be true whether you're working with new or veteran officials, we want you officials to know that, all right, we had an unusual situation in the game occur. All right, we got through it. In our post game, we need to stop and talk about that rule, both the rule reference and to discuss the play after the game. And we may find out, hey, we handled it right. Or we may find out, oh, we should have handled that differently. But we need to have a post game, and we learn by those situations, whether we're a new or veteran official.
Right. Don't take your rule book on the field. Don't take your phone on the field. Those things are not needed out there, but have them in your car or somewhere where you can refer to them after the game. So it's good to cover that.
Oh, here's one other thing pregame that we all need to be well aware of and be paying attention to is the ASA unapproved bat list.
Yeah.
Those bats that were approved that are no longer allowed in the games, and that list is probably on Jimmy's site, and it hasn't changed much in the last couple of years. But we need to be familiar with that list of bats that may not be used that were initially approved but are no longer, because those are illegal bats, and we're not looking for them anymore. But we need to be aware when a coach questions a bat. That kind of little chart, I can't remember all those bats. Sticking that list of bats in my back pocket and leaving it there until there's a question that comes up, there's a problem with it. Nothing wrong with having that list of bats. And that way you can look at that list and say, Coach, that bat's not on this list, so therefore it's legal.
Good point.
Anybody else have any questions?
Steve, I have something I would like to say.
Go ahead, Jeff.
It doesn't happen often, but it happens enough that it bothers me. And that is, don't put me in the position that I have to decide whether or not I'm going to report you for using tobacco products on the field. We're not allowed and we're not supposed to. So please don't put your fellow officials in that position where he has to decide, am I going to say something to somebody or not?
Yeah, I agree, Jeff, and we're not allowed to use it, nor players or anybody else. So why even have it at all? I would agree with you.
And that could be, Jeff and Donnie, that can also be not just with the tobacco products. I'm no longer in charge and I'm happy, but yeah, Bill, I see you laughing. Don't put yourself and your fellow official in a boat of having to deal with whether it's tobacco or alcohol on your breath or recently drunk something before a game.
Right.
And on a lighter side, alcohol and tobacco are very serious. But on the lighter side, if I come to the game, and Donnie's already covered, we need to come to a game dressed properly. But if I go to a game and I am just as slouchy as I can be, or I'm 10 or 15 minutes late to the game, you need to don't force your partner to, particularly on that late one, report you for being late. You need to call Jimmy and say, I was late. And and follow that up with an email to Jimmy and copy your partner so that your partner knows you reported yourself, so your partner does not have to report you. Because when I was supervisor, if you were late, I wanted you to report yourself. I didn't want Bill to have to tell me you were late. And you don't want Bill to tell me you were late because you feel like he's ratting on you. He shouldn't have to tell you. But Jimmy needs to know, and Bill needs to know that you have reported yourself, because is this a one-day problem or is this a multi-day problem? And that becomes a big issue if it's more than one time.
One thing I'll add, and I said earlier about understanding the intent of a rule, and you have to have some flexibility, but where a rule is clear cut, don't set aside a rule. You just can't do that. That'll get you in trouble. You gotta live within the rule that's there. But in a lot of cases, because a lot of our decisions are judgment, we have to understand the intent of the rule, but do not set aside a rule.
And this will be just for information. I'm going to change the subject a minute. If there's going to be middle school softball in Harnett County right now, so we will have middle school games there. There's not more in Lee County, but they play in the fall anyway. But there will be baseball games and more in Lee County later, late March, early April. Softball games and baseball games in Harnett County will start a little late, but they are scheduled to be playing. And one more question that deals with the same topic we were on prior to me saying that, how to cover your partner's a no-show. Number one, I'm going to go ahead and address it for you, Donnie, and you can add to it. Number one, if your partner's a no-show, one, you got to tell Jimmy. If you got the opportunity to let Jimmy know prior to the game, 10 or 15 minutes before the game, your partner's still not there, you need to text, email, text and call Jimmy and let him know. Maybe your partner has left for the game and is in a wreck. I've been in that situation where I get the call that somebody's not there. Well, my first worry is, have they been in a wreck? Are they okay? And my first question to you calling me and telling me he's not there is, did you confirm the game with him or her personally, other than the assignment, either by email, text, or call? That's my first question. Did he confirm the game with you? And the answer is yes. Then I'm concerned for that person. If the answer is no, I'm aggravated not only at that partner, but I'm just as aggravated at you that you didn't confirm the game, whether you're the plate umpire or the field umpire. So that's got to be reported, and you need to go back and try to call that game by yourself. And don't ask, do I get both game fees? No. The answer is no. You get one game fee.
Oh.
Go ahead, Donnie.
Yeah. Well, I was going to add to that too. If you're in that situation and, for example, you know your partner, they've made contact with you and saying they're going to be late, but they'll be there right about game time or so forth, go ahead and conduct a pregame conference. At least get that done. Coaches would rather do that than wait on you and be late. Because again, players want to play, coaches want to coach, and we need to go on and do that. But if there's no contact made, and sometimes a person might get in a situation they can't call you, and I understand that. If they're not there at game time, then you really don't have a choice but try to work the game by yourselves, as difficult as it might be. You'd be surprised at how understanding coaches are when they know you're there by yourself. It does change somewhat. So, but anyway, good question there. Hopefully you don't ever get in that situation. But it does need to be reported to Jimmy in one way or another, because that coaches want both officials there if at all possible. I don't know if there's any other comments, questions.
There's not any more questions in the chat. Does anybody else have any additional questions or something good for the group?
Well, good. I would suggest to you to get on the other clinics as they pop up, and I have all the dates right now in front of me, but you can go on the announcements page in Arbiter, and Jimmy's got them posted. You need to attend 6 if you can or more, and get all the information you can, especially if you're a new official. I mean, these are things that you need to be doing.